Thanks for joining me for this little video series. If you haven't gotten to check out the other pieces of it, please feel free to do that. It all ties together. So everything I'm sharing here is stuff that I've actually taught myself through a very interesting journey. And so if you're new here, or even if you're not, I want to share a little bit about what has led me to the work that I do, what has inspired me to become an implicit health life coach, like whatever that means, to explore these concepts of the body mind, to explore the miracles of the body mind, to explore the navigational structures of unconscious memories, to explore the interaction between navigation and regulation, to explore the correlation with these body-mind miracles in relation with the well-being of specific internal needs of attachment systems, to explore attachment systems themselves in a new way. The stuff that I use is all original concepts I've developed through my Implicit Revelations case study, and I am 100% self-taught. Everything I share is not stuff I learned from being taught by other sources. I taught myself a lot of concepts, and then a lot of things I discovered on my own by piecing together some insights from neuroscience with my own personal experiences, and then understanding inner realities just through the exploration of my own unique journey. So I want to share a little bit about my own implicit health journey and why I am inspired to do the work that I do, and why I love connecting with soul-aligned clients, and also those who are ready for the self-guided journeys that I offer, why I am so inspired to share this work, what drives me to share this work, and why I'm so passionate about connecting with those I can serve through this work. I'm going to share this in a very overly summarized, simplified way, because the way that my body mind now stores this information has nothing to do with the original experiences. And so I stay away from the way those original experiences unfolded most of the time, because I'm continuing to reinforce the new structures of my body mind, which tell a completely different navigational story than those original stories being told. But for the sake of sharing this here and what inspires me to my work, I want to share a little bit, but I'm going to share from kind of a distant perspective, because the data stored in my body mind has nothing to do with those original experiences now. And so at one point, there was a child developing, and they started to experience some really not good stuff. And they didn't know why they were experiencing it, and they didn't know how to communicate what they were experiencing, and everyone around this child had no idea what was happening either. And so it turns out, and a big trigger warning here, a little trigger warning, it turns out that there was a disruption of body-mind navigation and regulation because of suppressed childhood trauma, a very severe trauma that had happened that nobody knew about, including the child. Okay, there was no awareness at all that this thing had happened, but then the body-mind continued to develop around these implicit fragments, and the physical body itself developed around the structures of the trauma that had happened, and then the implicit health, the structures of navigation, regulation that are assisted through that attachment development process, that neurodevelopment of social engagement, not just with immediate family, but all people, all interactions with all people are contributing to this neurodevelopmental process, experiences of love and how attachment needs are being met or not met. Okay. And so then there's all these experiences that are being stored and filed and organized and sculpted on top of these fragments that of unprocessed traumas that weren't known about. And it began to manifest in some very unique ways. And there was some severe disruption, really severe insomnia, really severe night terrors, really severe, throwing stuff about the room and waking up with like scratches on your body and panicking and being terrified to fall asleep, and then going through your days and suddenly having these anxiety attacks, these panic attacks, and sometimes just feeling just so isolated from everything. And so it started from a pretty young age, but it wasn't understood. And how could it be when there's these projections of thoughts and feelings and movements in the body that are being disrupted? because of patterns of navigation and regulation that were created in past experiences, and then other experiences were navigating based on those patterns that were further using that disintegrated data to navigate existence. And then every time there was a projection of that disruption of navigation, that data got bigger and more prominent and was causing even more disruptions of the navigation, and just like grew, right? There's like this information that grew in the navigational patterns of the body mind. And so that was where it started, okay? And that was from a pretty young age. And then as teenagehood came, everything got even more intense. And the symptoms that were manifesting were along the lines of schizophrenia and schizoaffective, although they were not necessarily described as such during that time. Okay, and so, I mean, like, hearing voices and these different voices talking and these really severe disruptions of patterns of personality, if you will, and feeling like you're one person one day and a totally different person another day, and not being able to access different streams of energy. Sometimes you're just like all out there, and then sometimes you're just like depressed and cuddled up. And, a lot of it was, this is just normal being a teenager stuff. This is what happens when the body goes through its changes, and there's all these weird growth things happening, and you don't know how to feel, and that's just a part of it. And so again, it wasn't understood, and that's okay. And that's okay that it wasn't understood. That's completely okay. It's a part of the journey of evolving. But there are these patterns of thoughts and feelings and movements in the body, these patterns in mental, emotional, and behavioral health, these patterns of energy and regulation, these patterns of projections and navigation, and they were being disrupted. And what had happened by that point was that there were independently developed memory centers as a result of responding unconsciously to the suppressed trauma. The body-mind learned to have different alternate navigational structures because experiences were creating navigational information that didn't have connection with each other. And that's another complex concept that I won't go into right now. You can check out my videos about exploring body-mind islands for more information about that. To explore what I just described, I have a video playlist, several videos, especially one really good long one, a full feature class where I explore body-mind islands. You can find out more about that. But then there were these individual navigational patterns that were each carrying their own type of implicit health challenge, and there was all this disruption, okay? And then this continued, and this individual, a previous version of the self that evolved me to where I am today with the passion for implicit health life coaching, went through 10 years of being in the traditional mental health system. 10 years of seeing over 100, that's a 3-digit number, over 100 various therapists and psychiatrists across multiple states. And after 10 years, not only had things not gotten helped in any capacity, none of it was understood, none of it was being resolved, but they had continued to grow to such a severe state that the traumatic stress being experienced actually led to a complete loss of being able to create new conscious explicit memories in relation with the sense of self. And having such severe amnesic barriers between the individuated islands of navigational structures in the body mind that there was complete amnesia between different states of navigational patterns, different states of regulatory structures, different states of experiencing the self through body-mind miracles. And there were literally over 100 different types of challenges manifesting through various forms of implicit health. not to mention explicit health challenges in all kinds of things that were happening. Okay, so really complex challenges. And in addition, there were also many other traumas that occurred throughout adulthood, and also other relational difficulties, very unhealthy relational patterns for quite a long time. But all of that was just because the body mind was navigating from a place of trauma and unconsciously recreating those types of experiences without knowing it. And so even though this individual and those who might be in a similar situation or scenario did not cause these other further traumas, because of the way the body mind was navigating and regulating life, it tended to end up in situations where trauma was a possibility. And then it unfortunately did happen. But it can all be traced back to the fact that the formative foundational structures were navigating from a place of trauma. And so that's why those who have experienced trauma are likely to experience more of it, because the navigational structures are holding those pattern tendencies. And so it's really important that we interrupt those patterns and we start to bring healing resolution to them so they don't unconsciously recreate themselves. They don't unconsciously maneuver life in a way that it ends up in a scenario where experiencing more of that is a possibility. But it all comes down to helping to resculpt the implicit health of the foundation of the body mind. Okay, so there's suppressed childhood trauma, didn't know about it. Implicit health challenges started from a very young age, didn't understand it. Life goes on. Individuated navigational systems began developing before and by teenagehood. And then by the time there was adulthood, there was completely alternate states of navigational regulational structures that were navigating and regulating life in different ways, with dozens of implicit health challenges. And then through a journey of 10 years in various styles of therapy and psychiatry, not only were none of the implicit health challenges understood, not only had none of the battles been reduced or resolved in any capacity, but all of them had gotten so much worse that there were over 100 completely disabling challenges that led to a place where the brain-body systems could not create new memories anymore. The structures that allow for all those miracles of memory processing and the organization of those navigational patterns was just shot. It was just done. It was gone. It just wasn't there anymore. And that's when the Implicit Revelations Case Study began. And my very courageous inner best friend said, I'm going to develop new modalities. Because there's got to be a way to understand what's happening, and there's got to be a way to understand how to actually respond to it and resculpt these patterns. And so that began her journey. But that journey began when there were such severe memory resets that every 5 seconds to every 5 minutes, she could not remember who she was, where she was, or what she was doing. And this continued for about 2 years in the very beginning of the Implicit Revelations Case Study. And through her own work, she was gradually able to uncover the suppressed childhood trauma and reorganize the implicit memory fragments and guide a dozen different age-regressive states of consciousness, basically parts of self experiencing structures of the brain and the body that had stopped developing at a young age from when that first trauma had happened and had been basically stuck in time ever since, guiding them to not only process those past traumas, but to actually gradually complete their halted stages of neurodevelopment. So the brain and the body actually had to go through toddlerhood, go through early childhood, go through mid and late childhood, go through teenagehood all over again, because parts of the brain had never gone through that process when they were first developing. And so gradually through the Implicit Revelations Case Study, my inner best friend, was able to courageously, on her own, completely independent of all modalities, teaching herself every step of the way, even when she couldn't remember what was happening every few minutes. She had all of these complex systems that helped her, cope and get grounded and, struggle through all of the implicit health challenges, all of these hundreds of disruptions of navigation and regulation in the body mind to cope and manage all of it, and different ways of learning. And one thing she found really fascinating was that she would read stuff and highlight and take notes in the book, and she would come back to it a day later and actually have a full-blown panic attack in her body because she was terrified that she saw her handwriting but had no memory of writing that or reading those pages. This is what led to the Implicit Revelations Case Study. This is what led to the Implicit Revelations Case Study. And so in the early days, that was her life. And all day, every day, she showed up to be there for parts of herself. She showed up to confront the disruption of navigation and regulation. She showed up to confront the disruption of those projections in her body mind. She showed up knowing that every 5 seconds to 5 minutes, her brain would reset and she would not remember who she was, where she was, or what she was doing. She showed up knowing that that was happening, and she showed up anyway, and she showed up stronger, and she showed up bolder, and she showed up braver, and she showed up louder. And she let her love and her presence transcend every challenge and every obstacle she ever faced. Because she had been down every known route, and it had only led to nowhere she wanted to be. So she chose the route that was completely unknown, and she showed up for it every day, no matter what she faced. And so there's all these individuated navigational structures, severe amnesic barriers, no ability to create new conscious explicit memories. And she did this journey completely on her own. There were no other coaches or therapists or counselors or teachers or anything. She showed up and she did this journey on her own. And that began the Implicit Revelations Case Study. She reached a point where she had healed all of it. The foundational childhood trauma, all the disrupted neurodevelopment, completed the stages. She went through a process of reintegrating completely split brain hemispheres. She went through the process of gradually healing those capacities that allow you to make new memories. She gradually went through this process of, understanding that there were these, the body mind was remembering its patterns of feeling and movement, but she couldn't remember anything that was happening day to day, week to week, month to month, or even year to year for quite some time. She finally got to this place where all the amnesic barriers were broken down. She finally got to this place where those 100 plus implicit health disruption manifestations were being resolved. She finally got to this place where all the different traumas, the foundational ones, all the, the minor traumas, the lowercase T traumas, and then the big, major traumas, which were dozens and severe, and won't go into that, but really gnarly stuff. All of that was starting to get processed and transmuted, and all of that data integrated and connected. And then that was the end of 2020. And then began the Known documentary series, because she came out the other side of that and she suddenly realized it wasn't sudden. It literally took her about 3 to 5 months to actually realize this. But she realized that she could not remember her entire life. She went through all that stuff that I just shared, and then years into her Implicit Revelations case study, she actually had no idea that she had a case study of studying herself. She could not remember any of her life at all. None of it. She couldn't remember the last few years of the Implicit Revelations Case Study. She couldn't remember her original childhood. She couldn't remember all the years of adulthood. There was nothing. There was no navigational patterns being unified or accessed like at all. Just, it wasn't there. And it turns out that all of the data was still there, but it had become so disconnected from each other, so dissociated from its own data, so disintegrated. There was so much undercoupling where there's all this data, but it's not connecting, so it can't access navigational potentials at all. So it turns out all the data was actually still there, but it wasn't connected, so it couldn't provide navigation. And so she realized, it literally took her about 3 to 5 months to actually realize this, because you don't know what you don't know. Like, if you can't remember your life, there's not necessarily an awareness that you can't remember it, because there's no reference point to think that there's something to remember. So it actually took her about 3 to 5 months to actually come to a place where she was like, I just realized that I can't remember any of my life. And even if she went to places that her body had a lot of experiences, like, different parks that she'd been to all throughout her life, or different houses or places she'd stayed, or, any of it, there was no familiarity. None whatsoever. It's a brand new place. No memories ever made there. I have no clue. No, I've never been here before. Or there was such overwhelming implicit projections that the entire body was reliving some past experience, but she couldn't remember it, and she couldn't be grounded in the present moment. So it was always one or the other. And so then this began my lucid journey of the Implicit Revelations Case Study. It started all over because she had no memory of all the work she had done. She had no memory of teaching herself neuroscience. She had no memory of the excruciating journey that she went through, where her memory was resetting every few minutes, and nevertheless, she read dozens of books, dozens of times, and integrated the patterns of navigation where she could apply that information, even though she couldn't consciously remember reading any of it. She had no memory of teaching herself about all this stuff. She had no memory of, coming to all these amazing case study conclusions and epiphanies. She had no memory of creating the modalities that had changed her life. She had no memory of creating these brand new revolutionary modalities that had completely changed her life. She didn't remember any of it. And so then there was the Implicit Revelations Case Study that I am familiar with. And that was a journey of recreating the entirety of my body-mind from the ground up. But instead of working with past experiences, and instead of working with the existing navigational patterns, I was able to go in to the content and connectivity existing in the body-mind and resculpt the foundation of its structures. And by resculpting the foundation of the body-mind, everything that was grown on top of that foundation naturally rewrote and reorganized itself without me having to work with it directly. And so all of the things that I just shared about this story, those are memories of past experiences. But those were not able to be consciously remembered just a couple of years ago. In order to reorganize everything so that even years of fragments that were never processed, because the body-mind wasn't processing memories explicitly for several years, all of those memories and all of the memories preceding that, which couldn't be consciously accessed, and all of the childhood memories, which are doubly fascinating because the body-mind had to go through its stages of neurodevelopment, re-experience being an actual child in terms of brain-body activity. And let me just tell you, experiencing toddlerhood when you're in a grown adult body is pretty uncomfortable. Going through adolescence when you're a grown person is pretty uncomfortable. Adolescence does not get easier the second time around. That's one of my favorite Amnesia jokes, or my favorite age regressive jokes. We have a whole collection, me and her, in the mirror. That's hi. Her, me and her. We have lots of jokes because we've been on this journey all on our own. There haven't been anybody else, guiding this journey in any capacity. So me and her, we got jokes. We got jokes about all of the magic and miracles we've gone through together. The reason I was able to share all of this information about what led me to being inspired to sharing my gifts as an implicit health life coach, all of that are memories stored in the navigational patterns of my body mind beyond my awareness. And then there's the ability for me to intentionally access information without reliving it. And I was able to rewrite all of that data, literally a lifetime of experiences stored beyond my awareness, even when I couldn't remember any of that information, even when most of that information is stuff that is really painful to want to remember or try to remember. And a lot of that data were implicit fragments, unprocessed emotions, incomplete patterns of movement in the body. And that data was created on a foundation that wasn't organized to begin with. From a very young age, that data was being stored in independent navigational structures and didn't have connection with each other. Even when things were, functional and manageable, there were still individuated navigational systems in these chronic implicit health disruptions from a disruption of navigation regulation that originated from the well-being of attachment needs in these specific body-mind systems. And I was able to restructure all of that without working with a single past experience. And that is one of the most extraordinary miracles of my Implicit Revelations case study journey that continues to astound and amaze me. The level of reorganization in the navigational structures of my body mind is mind-blowing and astounding even to me. Compared to where things were, it's mind-blowing and astounding. And the fact that it has achieved the level of restructured organization in the patterns of navigation that allow me to associate with my own existence and experience things like thinking and feeling and moving. All of that information from every year of life, data in the body mind carrying different navigational priorities that provide information in different ways at different time for different reasons. Data from every year of life carrying certain styles of associating with its own self, its own existence. Data from every year of life that carries these abstract associations with every experiential element, real or imagined. Everything you see, smell, taste, hear, touch, abstract components of experience like seasons of the year, different environmental weather patterns like feeling humidity in the air, the ability to navigate that, those abstract experiential element, the ways that the body mind carries associations with them. There's data from every year of life in relation with all of this information, explicit, implicit data, roles of the neurobiological social engagement system, information of self-associations, the way the body mind associates with all experiential elements through abstract associations, and then the way that information throughout all these years of life and all this different data is connecting, not just the content it carries, but the way that that content is connecting and communicating and collaborating throughout itself beyond awareness. All of that data was able to be completely rewritten in the most profound way. And I did not ever need to work with specific memories of specific past experiences in order to accomplish all of that. So just to clarify, I can remember my entire life now. I can remember my entire life. But the way that that information affects me and how I connect with myself and instinctive patterns of thinking, feeling, moving, and responding, natural states of mental, emotional, behavioral, action pattern, habitual health, the way that I have a sense of self and experience my own self-associations, the way that the information from past experiences is stored in navigational patterns is completely written. And so not only can I remember my life when all of it was just complete amnesia just a couple of years ago, but it has been totally reorganized. So now the stories of those past experiences don't affect me the way that they might otherwise have and used to a lot. The stories of the past experiences don't affect me at all, but I can access the information from any of it, and the patterns of navigation are completely resculpted. And so I can remember my entire life now, but the way that those experiences affect me is completely different because it's been reorganized and rewritten and restructured in the process of being recovered. But again, I did not work with any memories to accomplish all of that. I didn't work with any memories to recover my lifetime of memories. I didn't work with any memories to rewrite the patterns of navigation. I didn't work with any memories to rewrite how it's affecting me now and how I have access to it at all. And so it's really about understanding how the body mind actually works, how it's storing information, why it's storing information, how it's using that information, and then how we can influence those structures of navigation and regulation to shapeshift personal experience from the inside out. So that's a little bit about my own personal journey of what has led me to the Implicit Revelations Case Study and the work I love to do, including offering my self-guided journeys. There's over a dozen different self-guided journeys, everything from exploring and understanding the body-mind to completely restructuring, transforming, or resculpting aspects or elements of the body-mind. And all of these are original concepts that I've developed through my work. Again, I'm completely 100% self-taught. And so I, taught myself psychology, neuroscience, neurodevelopment, attachment development, but then I expanded on that. And everything that I share is the ways that I've pieced together that information through my own self-healing journey. So all of this is new concepts that I've developed through my very unique journey. And so the self-guided journeys that I offer, the inspiration for the merchandise designs in my merchandise store, the Implicit Revelations gift package, some of the best work from my case study, and the journeys that I offer through one-on-one sessions, both one-time sessions and multi-month journeys, especially those multi-month journeys, including Implicit Resolution, which is a 6-month journey to permanently resolve any type of implicit health challenge. And the miracles of my own journey is what inspires me to share this and offer this, because there was so much that was going on, right? And then through my own inner explorations, so much more was accomplished than ever imagined. And to finish the story up a little bit here, to summarize it, there was challenges in early childhood, which compounded to teenagehood, which compounded in adulthood, about 10 years of going through traditional routes of therapy and psychiatry. And not only were things not being understood or resolved, but things got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where there were over 100 different implicit health challenges happening all day, every day, with no relief from them. Nothing was helping, and no understanding of why it was happening or what to do about it. Had tried every modality, including EMDR, and so many other different, internal family systems model. Like everything was, used in that journey. Every type of freaking medication, every type of therapeutic approach, every type of everything, and nothing was helping, and everything just got more and more intense. And it got to the point where the brain and the body could no longer create new memories, and every 5 seconds to 5 minutes, there was a complete reset of activity. There was so much dissociation, so much disintegrated data, so much mind-body disconnect. The language centers were shutting down. There was selective mutism, anxiety, depression. Like, there was literally every challenge in the book. And there's even, dermatillomania. Like, she'd be picking at her skin and like bleeding, and she didn't even know it because the mind and the body were so disconnected. Like every freaking challenge you could imagine. Insomnia, night terrors, severe post-traumatic stress disorder, like literally everything that could be possibly described in the book. And she was done with outside guidance because it wasn't helping. And she showed up for her own inner journey and began the Implicit Revelations Case Study, even though it wasn't called that at the time. And she went through this journey to understand and transform her experiences. And she was able to resolve all 100 plus implicit health challenges, uncover the suppressed childhood trauma that she didn't even know that was like there, but she was able to find that out on her own through her own journeys of self-hypnosis. And that is part of what inspired the Social SoulSelf Inward Imagination Ignitions, one of the many services that I offer. I teach the concepts so that you can actually use the journey on your own, as well as guiding you through personalized versions of the journey. And there's different ways of applying it to fulfill different intentions in different ways, but it's a very powerful meditative self-hypnotic type journey. It's an inward imaginative ignition of consciousness to practice social self-engagement through inward closed eyes imaginative journeys. And so that was where that originated, was because she used that to actually uncover suppressed childhood trauma that she didn't know was there, that was actually behind all these years of implicit health challenges, all these decades of health struggles in her mental states, emotional states, behavioral states, action pattern states, the ways the personality presents in terms of, associating with yourself and encountering everything, within and outside of you. So there was these self-hypnotic journeys. She uncovered the original suppressed childhood trauma, transmuted all those implicit fragments. That was an excruciating journey that took, months and years, and was doing this all day, every day, showing up on her own. During this time, there was such severe trauma responses that she was actually experiencing really severe oxygen deprivation, which took a long time to even know that that was what was happening. And then she went through 700 hours of self-administered oxygen therapy to heal that, while practicing daily meditation and breathing to, put in new patterns of regulation in her body, while transforming the navigational structures that were contributing to that, because the body went into a state of oxygen deprivation when the traumatic stress was being activated. And so by healing the navigational patterns, she was able to help heal the regulatory protocols. And all of this was on her own. She did this entire journey on her own, showed up day in and day out, transformed all of it, allowed these age regressive states of consciousness to progress through the halted stages of neurodevelopment that had been stuck and stopped all those years ago beyond awareness. And then she came out the other side and she couldn't remember any of her life. And then she went through and continued to show up every day. And that was when the Known documentary series was created, and she was trying to, recreate a sense of self. Like, who am I? How do I associate with myself? What do I know? How do I speak? There was no navigational patterns to tell her that. So she started to recreate them from scratch. She basically had just come out of her original neurodevelopment, but had no memory of it, and was like, okay, I'm brand new. How we do this being alive thing. And, I still work on that every day. And that was when she was using social self-engagement practices 24/7, including, but not limited to, 5 to 10 hours of speaking and singing to herself in mirrors every day. And that was the birthplace of Mirror Play with Mirror Power, one of my most profound journeys that I offer. And gradually, she noticed that practicing social self-engagement, nourishing internal attachment needs of the body-mind, consciously creating new patterns of navigation, new patterns of thinking, feeling, moving, and responding, consciously creating new regulatory protocols, was actually rewriting all of the data that existed in the body-mind. And then she was noticing that her amnesia was completely healing. But instead of remembering her life and associating with herself based on those memories, she was able to restructure the navigational patterns that are the purpose of memories. And that was a gradual process, of course, and, recreating the way that all the patterns of feeling and moving and responding and everything are unconsciously stored throughout these trillions of networks, but without working directly with any memories in, particular specific memories. And she was gradually able to reformulate conscious memories, which took about a year. But then she noticed that even though she had for the first time in half a decade, been able to create new explicit memories, they weren't being organized in relation with any sense of self. And then she went on a journey to, recreate, how does my body mind associate with itself? How do I reconnect with myself? How can I associate with who I am? How do I learn to love who I am? How do I learn to associate with myself in a way that I've never associated with myself before? Because everything else was association based on trauma, basically. There's basically 15 years that were experienced as one big trauma response, basically. And that was how all of life had been lived. So it's a process of literally recreating existence from scratch, recreating yourself from the ground up. And so in terms of looking at it just for intriguing Implicit Revelations case study's sake, the very first conscious explicit memory was generated in the autumn of 2020. And then that gradually improved. And for a reference point, just a few months prior, the day-to-day amnesia was so severe that she started to play certain games at someone's suggestion. She was working with a chiropractor who was really amazing about sharing the journey, and that was the only medical professional of any kind incorporated in these years and years and years of healing. And the suggestion was, take something that you use every day, put it in a place that you wouldn't normally put it, and see if you can find it the next day. And so she took her toothbrush thing and put it on some random shelf like several rooms over. And the next day when she went to go brush her teeth, it was, my toothbrush isn't here. Do I remember where I put it? And so that was like the intensity of how severe things were. And that was actually what began creating moments of happily ever after. Throughout this journey here, I've shared several different videos, and you can go to the search thing if you haven't seen them and look happily ever after, look it up. But the reason that these happily ever afters were created is because she wanted a way to guide her brain to manually process the day's experiences, because they weren't being automatically processed. Memories weren't being stored as memories. And the navigational patterns weren't being assisted by her day-to-day growth and evolution. And so at the end of each day, she would write down moments of things that she experienced that were positive and say, and I lived happily ever after. I went for a walk and I lived happily ever after. I did this and I lived happily ever after. I saw this and I lived happily ever after. And so even though she couldn't remember the stuff going on, there were moments of living happily ever after, moment memories. And that led to a whole other breakthrough, because that's actually the way the body-mind stores things. The body-mind stores moment memories. When there's a pattern of feeling, when there's a pattern of movement, when there's a certain particular association with a particular experience, they're moment memories. It's only when different pieces of content connect in a certain way that you have kind of this linear autobiographical storyline. But the way the body-mind actually thinks unconsciously is in moments, individual patterns of content. And so moment memories. And so the first explicit memories being created for the first time in nearly half a decade was in autumn 2020. And she was amazed that she could remember looking at the leaves changing color. But of course, at that time, she had no memory of ever having seen the leaves change color before. And then in autumn 2021, was the very first time that there was a sense of self at all. And that was 8 months plus into speaking and singing to herself in mirrors for 5 to 10 hours a day, and editing hundreds of hours, I don't know if it was hundreds, a lot of hours of video content watching herself and learning to associate with herself again, learning to associate with what her voice sounded like, learning to associate with what her face looked like, learning to associate with this body that she lives in. And it's been this very gradual process of learning to reassociate, because if you go somewhere, for example, and you sit in your car and you pull up your phone and you go to like Google Maps and you're like, let me look up this place and let me drive there. The reason that you can do that is because the body mind remembers having done it before. But there was a time when my inner best friend didn't have access to that data. And so if she went to sit in a car and, she's going out for, a trip for the day, she's like, I've never done this before. Even though she didn't have memory of it. She used to travel a lot. She had been on many road trips before. She had put in the name of a place and driven somewhere new or somewhere familiar dozens and hundreds of times over many, many years. She had no memory of it. And she would go to the Google Maps, sitting in a car, like, I've never done this before. How weird that you can like put in the name of a place and get directions and then like drive and like have a new experience you haven't had before, because she had no memory of having experienced that. So this is what led me to my Implicit Revelations case study. This is what has led me to developing the new modalities that I've developed and offering the services and products that I offer to serve and support the healing journey of loving liberation for those around the world. And the amazing part is that anyone, anywhere can benefit from these concepts. Whether you're going through a really severe implicit health challenge, like maybe something I described or something totally different, or your implicit health is, fine, peachy keen, but you're expanding into greater self-love. You're expanding into new ways of associating with yourself. You're expanding into new potentials of thinking, feeling, moving, and responding. You're expanding into new ways of associating with different components of life. You're expanding the ability to have relational connections with yourself and others. You're expanding your, capacity to encounter different emotions and to go into some deep emotions and feel them and process them, and then go into greater heights of emotions that you've never felt before. Different patterns of expansion and loving liberation. So whether there's, healing from something really intense or expanding into something really wondrous, or maybe a combination of both, all of these different services and products offer amazing, amazing journeys in different ways. So I'm very excited to share it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Thank you for exploring this, and stick around for the rest of this magnificent video series as we explore implicit health.